All right, Kevin, we're back on LinkedIn, Coffee with a Corporate Security Leader. We're going to have an interesting discussion about something that I don't know a ton about, but I think you do. Uh, we're going to talk about design elements that will enhance your security of your corporation, of your building, of your environment. CPTED, I think it's a really interesting topic to discuss. Architecture, environmental design, space planning, all of that stuff goes into CPTED. But let's define it a little bit. I mean, I am a layman when it comes to this as a security practitioner, but you have a much better understanding. Tell me, how do you define CPTED?
Yeah, and I think it's a great topic, and I am by no means a septet expert at all.
Oh, I
But
called it. You're a CPTED expert. It's done.
there are septet experts out
There are,
there, so
yes,
they can
that's
get the
true.
certification. But yeah, no, I think it's such an important part of any security program because it can be utilized by everyone. And it's just all about how you're designing your environment to basically influence human behavior. It's amazing what a simple environment can do to influence someone's behavior. And it doesn't. When people think septet, they think, oh, vegetation management. Making sure bushes aren't too close to the building, trees aren't too low where someone can climb them, or maybe they're like, oh, okay, hey, uh, maybe some vehicle barriers or blah blah blah. Well, it's so much more than that. It just really goes into the security lighting, the placement of cameras, yes, vegetation. What type of vegetation you have. There's so many things that boil down into septet, and it's not just the exterior of the building; it can be the interior as well. How you design the interior as well can have a great influence on someone's behavior. Yeah, just all about how you design your environment, as is defines it as an approach to reducing crime or security incidents through the strategic design of built environment, typically employing organizational, mechanical, and natural methods to control access, enhance natural surveillance and territoriality, and support legitimate activities. So, going back to the core concepts of what our profession does, what physical protection system does: deter, detect, delay, and respond.
Yeah.
That's and then the components of SEPTA that help us to create basically those layers of security, or as people to defense in depth. We want to have as many layers as we can to delay that adversary as much as we can. So I think it's a really important part of any, again, program, and really needs to be brought to the attention of facilities, the facilities department and executives, whether you're doing a remodel or a new build, or maybe you just want to make some changes to your current environment. I think it's really important that those conversations also be had during those planning phases, so people know what to expect.
Do you think that CPTED is a program in its whole, or is it something that enhances your program, and that you should incorporate these design elements anyways into everything that you do? Because nobody wants to go to work in a prison or in a jail or something that looks like a fortress. Um, it, are we using CPTED as a program, or is it the design elements are all in there anyways, and we're just kind of doing it as well?
Yeah, I
Is it
don't think
something
it's really.
separate?
Yeah, I don't think it's really a separate program. Granted, there might be some, entities that have their own separate program just for that, but I don't really kind of only see that in an industry that maybe they have a lot of new builds coming up, or maybe they have to, maybe it could be a government facility. They have to meet certain, regulations and standards for that. But I don't think it's really depending on the entity, it doesn't really warrant a full independent program within the company. So, but definitely, if you talk to consultants, and there's SEPTED experts that have SEPTED certifications, and this is what they specialize in, they can really come in and help you maximize those design plans for you.
How do you look at when you're joining an organization? You've got all these different properties, buildings, what have you. How do you ensure that you're meeting the design aesthetics that will keep people safe, will fulfill these SEPTED guidelines, and still create an environment that doesn't feel like a prison? Is that something that you have to uh, to do on your own, or like you said earlier, being collaborative with facilities, being collaborative with your building teams? How do you do that? How do you ensure that?
That's a great question. So, I mean, again, it's just really about, having those discussions early on. Um, so, for example, in my current role, when I came in, they hadn't heard of a CPTED program, which is fine. People that don't have a security program usually haven't, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
But showing them, hey, little things that we can tweak to greatly enhance hey, the visibility of our security cameras, or again, the natural surveillance of our facility. So, for example, you know, at one of our locations, we had bushes that were so high they were pretty much covering the windows, but you should have been able to see on the inside, but because of the vegetation, you couldn't. Like, okay, well, hey, if we manage this, we greatly improve our natural surveillance. Again, adding that deterrence factor in there. So,
Do you find that out by doing assessments, though? Is this something you have to, like, I've got to go make sure we've assessed every building and every property and know what's going on there? And you're this is maybe even something constantly that you're doing, right? SEPTED.
yeah, I don't think it's something that really needs to be, constantly assessed. You, I think it's important that you establish guidelines, a policy yourself. Like, with my company, I try to establish basically a vegetation management program to help manage all those issues, and say, I just use basically SEPTED standards like, hey, uh, keep inches, or excuse me, keep vegetation bushes like below 36 inches, tree branches no higher than like, I believe it's like 10 feet or something like that, and so far away from the building exterior. Uh, so I just kind of bring that up, say, hey, these little changes that we can make can really do a great deal to enhance our program. For example, one of my locations, they have a lot of trees, and well, we have a lot of cameras on the outside. Well, most of my cameras were blocked.
Blocked.
And so it's
Yeah.
like, hey, okay, I, called our landscaping company and said, hey, I want to trim these trees and that trees and these bushes and move this, whatever. They came in, and all of a sudden it's like, wait, we have great secure, camera coverage in that area now.
So doing
So,
camera audits is a good idea too, where
oh,
you're
absolutely.
not just checking the actual camera and the technology, the dome, those kinds of things, making sure those things are clear, but checking to make sure that vegetation isn't overgrowing something that you need to see.
Yeah.
What else is there? There's got to be something. We have to understand lighting, right? Parking lot
Yeah.
lighting is different than pathway lighting. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so lighting is so important. That can do a great deal to add that deterrence factor to your program, and at the same time making your employees feel safe. If someone has to stay late at work and they park outside and it's pitch black, they they may not feel safe depending on who they are.
Right.
Um, and having that lighting, it's like, okay, well, hey, I'm in a well lit area. People can see me. I can see others. I can see what's going on. There's no uh, hiding spots that I can't see. So, lighting is super important, and establishing, hey, okay, should we have these lights? If it's, say it's parking lot lights, okay, hey, do these need to be on a timer? Do they take into account, the changes in times, for daylight savings time and sunset and sunrise and all that. So having those factors, those considerations factored in is super important. Lighting can do so much to improve not only the security of your facility, but again, helping your employees feel safer, and it can also help increase the aesthetics of your building, make it look more welcoming, more inviting to uh, nor regular people, not
Yeah.
not an
Potential
average set.
clients
So
and
yeah,
customers.
exactly. Again, it's all about creating that deterrence. It's like, you want to create that target shift. You want to make it to where the adversary believes, okay, hey, there's either a high possibility of failure, a high possibility of getting caught, or both, or something like that, uh, forcing them to hopefully elect another target. But you always got to include, you can't stop 100% of incidents. A determined adversary doesn't care how much lighting there is or cameras or something like that. They're going to find a way. So,
Right. What's the main goal? Is there a fire safety goal at all with SEPTED?
fire safety, with CPTED itself, I don't think I can accurately answer that just because, again, I'm not an expert. I don't know all the ins and outs of a CPTED concepts. I do know, the basic stuff, but fire safety is, I'm sure, is part of it, but I would think that would fall more under life safety events than trying to use it to basically manipulate your physical environment to produce behavioral effects.
What are some of the behavioral effects that people become feeling more welcome, people wanting to be in the workspace more often, which we don't have right now anyways because of COVID, right?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, there's lots of things you can do. Again, having a well-lit environment, whether it's inside or outside, um, those lighter colors usually are that to induce that warm, inviting feeling coming in. But again, just how you design your facility, so you don't want to have like a fence. Maybe you don't want a fence, and you're going around the perimeter of your building if you don't have to, because it looks, again, like you said, a fortress.
Yeah.
Well, so some things I've seen in the past is like, one person, client I did consulting for years ago, instead of a fence, they put rose bushes, along a wall of their
Yep.
building because it was, it had access to lower level windows. Well, I don't want to go through a thorny rose bush, so I'm sure that that can create those behavioral effects, or even using the environment to help kind of create a a natural flow for foot traffic. So if someone is coming to the building or scoping out the building, using your environment to help force them to move a certain way or go to a certain area so that they can be seen or surveilled or just noticed by the security team if they have one. So.
Sure. Yeah, knowing where to go to enter a facility without necessarily having to have signs that
Yeah.
point exactly where to
Exactly. And
go.
plus, it also kind of helps, establish, those natural boundaries. Again, establishing what's considered, your territory. Dogs, mark their animals mark their territory. That's kind of, again, SEPTA can, kind of mark those boundaries in a natural way if you don't want to do, you know, cast iron, fences or something like that. If you don't have to, there are some industries that, hey, it doesn't matter if it does look like a prison. They have to meet certain regulations. So, but, but
Have you
again,
ever
I mean,
used
go ahead.
have you ever used trees for vehicle barriers? Have you ever seen that done?
No, no, I've never seen that done, nor would I ever recommend it. Um, because I mean, it natural resource. It can rot. It can fail. It's not a good solution. If people need vehicle barriers, there's so many other options out there. However, if you're not wanting to put, like these big vehicle bollards
Yeah,
or
that's what I was
concrete
thinking.
barriers down
Yeah.
or crash gates, they
Right.
actually make decorative or vehicle
Oh,
barriers
okay.
where
So it looks like a
basically.
potted plant or something.
Exactly. And what,
Yeah.
yeah, it looks it's just like a big potted plant, but it's anchored into the ground. Like it's got the supports like going multiple feet below the surface to give you that good crash rating. So, because and these ballers are very capable of, what's the standard? 2-ton truck or something like that, 55 miles an hour or something like that,
Wow.
completely capable, of stopping a vehicle like that. So
Yeah,
those are
or
things that people can
somebody
consider.
accidentally hitting the accelerator on their BMW and crashing into something,
Yeah,
crashing into the
yeah,
front of your building. Yeah,
yeah,
I've seen that.
exactly.
I've had that. I've also had a vehicle. We had a property that was on a very busy street, and we had trees that lined that property to mark the barrier, mark the edge of the property.
Hmm.
And a vehicle was traveling southbound at a high rate of speed and ended up leaving the roadway and wrapping itself around several of those trees.
Oh
Whereas
my
if those
goodness.
trees we didn't have, and that's kind of where I was asking you the vehicle barrier thing, but I don't know that it was designed to be this. I think it was just a row of trees to mark the property. But if the trees had not been there, it would have gone clearly into other vehicles parked on property and maybe even the building. So
Wow.
we got very, very lucky there. But I've been involved a little bit in design. When I was at NVIDIA, we designed this iconic new building. And although this was what the design team wanted, they neglected the core or the interior of the building as it was accessed from the parking structure.
Hmm.
So when you would come up in the building, not to give too much away because I think it's fixed now, but you'd come up through the parking structure and you could just get straight access to the rest of the
Yeah.
building through a stairwell and an elevator because they didn't want lobbies on every level.
Yeah.
And I believe they fixed it now. But uh, engaging, I think the design team, the facilities team, early on with, hey, this is our security standards is really
Hmm.
important. And not to say that, oh, I want cameras everywhere and I want badge readers and doors, I want gates and barriers because I don't want people to walk around. But we do have to restrict access. I mean,
Yeah.
we have an OSHA standard, a duty to protect. We do have to have some level of restriction for people moving about non-public areas of our buildings. But what else do you recommend? How do we control people? What's the best way to? I mean, we got path lighting, and we talked a little bit about
Yeah.
that kind of design. But how do you
Yeah.
control people moving around a facility without making it look like you're
Well,
going through Sally ports?
yeah. So so CPTED kind of has three general categories to approaches. So you can implement like mechanical measures to kind of emphasize use, of hardware and technology solutions to, provide physical protection such as access control and things of that nature. But there's also organizational measures, which uses, policies and procedures and activities that encourage observation, reporting, intervention where appropriate. Um, but that includes, training for both protection and developing a sense of ownership and responsibility. And then and I'm sorry, I'm kind of reading from a paper here. This is not just off the top of my head. Then there's natural and or architectural measures, so
Okay.
incorporating into the design to use of space. So, and things you can also use, again, things such as signage, or just how you simply just keep up. Yeah, excuse me, I'm sorry. Go about with the upkeep of your facility. I mean, I think that can be a big point in controlling that human flow of traffic. If you have, excuse me, your environment set up, excuse me, to where people are required to go through multiple layers of security, again, providing that protection in depth, that just increases or excuse me, minimizes your risk or the potential for uh, unauthorized access to happen. So again, creating those multiple layers of security. So if someone again, so let's just go from the beginning. So if someone's coming up to the building, we want to guide them to the front entrance. So yeah, we might use fence, we might use a row of bushes or whatever, signage, indicating where the main entrance is. If there's another entrance that is not public entrance, making sure that those are clearly labeled, and then again providing direction to where the public entrance is. And when they come in, hey, they're greeted by someone. Maybe there is an access control gate there, like a little turnstile. And then once they get in from there, okay, well, where do they need to go? Does someone need to come down and meet them, or they just have free range?
Right.
Some companies or buildings have elevators that are access controlled. So that's just adding that other layer. Really locking that person, not locking them, but isolating them in a certain
Yeah,
area so they
restricting
can't
them.
get around. So yeah,
Yeah.
so making sure that you have an efficient access control system in place, with updated, most updated, up to date technology that you can that your company can afford, or that fits your needs. I should say is the most important part. Is as long as it meets your needs, and then having those policies and procedures in place, and then enforcing those policies and procedures through training, regular communication with your personnel, and so that you are reinforcing, hey guys, it's good to be observant and report something that maybe looks suspicious, or hey, you see, or approaching someone that you don't recognize because they don't have a badge, they're not wearing a company badge. So, hey, can I help you? And then like, oh, I'm just looking for so and so. Like, oh, well, hey, I'll take you to the front desk, and then we'll get a hold of that person for you. All those things are so important in influencing that human behavior, not only from outsiders but from your own personnel as well.
Yeah, customer service does go a long way, I think, to help reduce crime or reduce bad acts or reduce,
Yeah.
risk. Just reaching out and talking to people. I always encouraged our security officers to be forward leaning and be helpful, because
Yeah,
that's way better than allowing people just to run around and being a good observer, right? I mean, we want them to be good observers, but I also want them to talk to people and mitigate
exactly.
those risks and be helpful there.
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah, I mean,
so,
just influencing that I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
no, good.
yeah, influencing that human behavior can be as simple as, having those officers, interacting with people that are coming in or even other employees, because that is showing someone, okay, hey, they pay attention, they've seen me, they could probably describe me. So again, you're adding that deterrence factor, hopefully, adding to that ability to create that target shift. So, I mean, doing something as simple as making eye contact with someone, saying hello, asking their name, something like that can be a great deterrence. I've seen cases before where um, someone has gone into like let's say rob a bank or basically just do some sort of criminal activity, and simple human interaction, saying, "Hey, how are you today? Can I help you?" makes them change their mind and walk out. Because like, okay, well, I've been seen, they can recognize me. So things like that can be considered part of your CPTED program, because that is how you have designed your environment. Your environment is to have your security officers or your employees making sure that they're greeting everyone.
And that's right where I was going with my next question, which is about culture. How do you ensure that the culture or that SEPTED and the culture, fit nicely and support both programs equally? You can't. I wouldn't think you could have something that was very aggressive as far as the security posture if your organization didn't really support that or want that.
Yeah, I mean, there's always a fine balance between what you're implementing and then ensuring that it is going to fit, your culture. I mean, what might work in one of my offices may not work in another because it
Yeah,
might be
good point.
a slightly different culture over there. So you have to design your program so that it doesn't, you know, unnecessarily make people's lives more difficult or inconvenient or something like that. Yes, we understand we need to have security measures in place. That's part of, that's just part of pretty much anywhere you work now. And employees get that. Everyone's so used to that. But we just don't want to overdo it so much to where it's like, okay, now it's becoming a hindrance and is actually causing more issues than it's solving. So, before you implement any type of measure or plan or any policy procedure, really important to go through a very thorough evaluation to make sure, hey, is this going to fit? Is this a good idea? What are the pros and cons of doing it? What are the pros and cons of not doing it? And then,
Yeah, what are the
again,
costs if you
costs,
don't do it?
reaching out to stakeholders, kind of getting their opinions on it, putting some feelers out there. So yeah, just making sure, but if you're coming into a new role, making sure that you're taking the time to learn the company and learn the culture and have those conversations with people across at all levels of the organization, from the C-suite, on down to the lowest level employee, because what the CEO, COO, CFO might think of or what their priorities are may be completely different from what the reality is from what one of the and learn about your company and how it operates and how the culture is and things of that nature before you go through and try to implement anything.
Yeah, I totally agree. And one thing that I've done in the past is, audits and then doing some type of um, assessment of and research on how is it working post implementation. Are people doing what they should be doing? You're doing audits to check that. I had a situation where I had a security officer who was tied up for 6 hours or 8 hours a night um, at the cafe during graveyard shift. And when I dug in to find out what was going on, they were doing escorts for food, and that was not something that we had agreed upon to do with
Hmm.
the cafeteria. And so we told the cafe, you've got to provide either pay for an additional security person. You're taking almost a whole shift up
Yeah.
for one person, or change your hours or something. but we need to account for this time. And I never would have known about it had I not done the assessment. And
Yeah.
if you don't survey people and ask them, hey, how do you feel here? How is this new procedure, this new badging procedure, whatever it is, how's that
Yeah.
affecting you? How does that affect your day-to-day work? Not that we are going to change it necessarily and make things less
Exactly.
safe, but it gives you feedback that when something does escalate to a higher level, that they go, well,
Hmm.
why are you doing this? Why are you requiring that? And being forward leaning, at least in thinking about what could happen, what could be the positive and negative effects of this new security element that we've established, or that this new safety procedure that we're requiring people to do, and being forward leaning and understanding those things before it goes bad or before something negative comes up, I think goes a long way. And when something negative does happen, you can say, yeah, we knew about that. We've done a survey, we've done
Yep.
an audit, we saw it coming. And so I think, CPTED is great because it's a series of standards, right, or best practices that
Yeah.
folks
Guidelines. Yeah.
guidelines. And then, but don't forget, and I know you know this, but uh, people should be mindful that you also need to audit, assess, survey, see how things are going. So it's kind of a
Exactly.
cycle. You've implemented all these great CPTED practices, whether it be lighting or design or cameras or vegetation and so on, and those are all great. But how's that? What's the long term effect there? How is that working out?
Exactly.
To your point about you trimmed the trees and then everything looked great on camera, but in 6 months or a year, the trees are going to go back, the leaves are going to come back, and unless you're
Exactly.
auditing those cameras and those kinds of things, you're not
Yep.
knowing. You don't
Yeah.
know.
That's like that. Going off that, like each year. Or so before leaves start growing, I'm looking at what's how it's growing, and I compare it to a picture from the year previous.
Mm.
you know, and then or I look out, okay, hey, what's it look like, when it's when the vegetation's full, and then okay, does this new growth, is that going to impede anything? And then that's something I recently completed, and that has allowed me to get ahead of what I knew were going to be issues. But again, it's not just it's everything about the security program has to be regularly assessed and audited and just double checked. I mean, it, I'm sure everyone's heard this saying. It's like trust but verify. Like I
Yeah.
trust my program is working. I trust what people are telling me. I trust what people are reporting to me. But you still need to verify everything. You still need to verify that things are, meeting uh, company standards, your standards, regulatory standards. So you can't just let things go by the wayside, because if you do and then something goes wrong, well, guess what? Now you're going to be in, and if someone potentially gets hurt, you could possibly be in some sort of legal battle. And then
Right.
if you go back and say, oh, well, yeah, we implemented this, but then we never checked on it, well, that's not going to fly in court. So it's just
No,
like
well, and
you
that's
have to go.
premises liability, right? You're
Exactly.
going to get jammed up because your security was either there was a false sense of security because, oh, I saw the lights in the cameras. Oh yeah, well that camera doesn't work and that's a dummy camera.
I have
I've
seen
talked with
so many
security
dummy
guys. They say,
cameras. It's ridiculous.
like, what are you
So,
doing? Don't for people at home. Do not put dummy
no.
cameras out.
Well, that
Those
can
do not.
that can also that can also potentially cause a liability issue,
Right.
depending on, where you live and all that. I mean, I've seen cases where it's been like, hey, yeah, this place had these cameras up, but they purposely installed them. There's just the shells, just the domes,
That's right.
to the
That's
casing,
right.
because they thought it would deter people. Well, then someone got hurt, a citizen, and it was just like, and they ended up getting sued because, like, hey, well, hey, you say, and they had signage saying, oh, property
It's
under surveillance, whatever,
CCTV.
24 hours a
Right.
day, blah, blah, blah. And then they go back to get the video. It's like, oh, well, we don't have video surveillance. Wait, what? So, yeah, it's very important to just, make sure that you're constantly staying on top of those things.
And we're kind of coming up on time, but let me ask you one last
Yeah.
thing. Have you ever had a situation where you're managing a property or managing an office that you don't own the property? Where you're a tenant, this kind of tenant
Oh, yeah.
landlord
I have
relationship.
that going on right now.
And so, tell us, I don't want to share my stories only, but tell us, how do you manage CPTED in that kind of environment where you can't maybe break walls and bust concrete
Yeah,
to put
yeah.
in what your standard is? How do you manage that relationship?
Again, you gotta. It's all about communication. Making sure, like, when I first came on board and I found out which areas were either company owned or we leased, it's like I would make sure, hey, I'm reaching out to the property manager. I'm reaching out to whoever I need to reach out to, whether it's like property manager, facilities manager, their security folks. I'm going to at least reach out to all of them to at least introduce myself. But then again, to establish that relationship, and and then have that constant communication. So whenever if something does come up that you need done, it can happen, and they're usually pretty good about working with folks. So one of my offices, the vegetation was actually really bad around the exterior. Lighting was kind of bad. Well, I just quick email, a phone call to the property manager because him and I had that established relationship. We discussed it. We coordinated something and we got taken care of. So and it's depending on what you need to do. Now, granted, if you are a tenant and you're moving into a new space and there needs to be remodeling, well, obviously that's going to be discussions that need to be had between your facilities folks, the building owners, facilities folks, the general contractors, construction teams, all that. So all those discussions, but hopefully you as a security professional are involved in those conversations so that you can make things happen. So
It's a great point. I think we need to when we're a part of our key stakeholders, we need to make relationships with the folks that are going to do the construction or the space planning or
yeah,
contracting and leasing, so that we have forward knowledge of, hey, we're planning to open up 4 new offices in all these different places. We're going to be tenants, so we
yeah,
won't own the building. Just so you know, in case we need any security. Security is usually the last person or the last organization brought into these situations.
or not at
So
all.
yeah, yeah. The more forward leaning you can be and more
Yeah.
aggressive you can be in engaging them, and that's almost a full time job if you have a big organization that's going through
Yeah, I
growth.
mean, and what I try to do, at least a few times a week, is I take a walk around the building and just talk to random people. I don't talk to the same people each day. Just casually just shooting the bull with them and just kind of figuring out kind of getting a feel and say, hey, what, and then I might ask them a question. Hey, what do you think about this? Would
Sure.
you like to see anything different? So I coming up with ways to gather that information, whether it be with formal meetings with the higher stakeholders or conducting like a security satisfaction survey. That's something I'm actually trying to get going. But it doesn't have to be a formal survey. It can be informal, such as again just walking around,
Walking around.
chatting with people. That's how I found out so much information. Just by again walking around and shooting the bull and finding common ground, finding common interest, and just building that relationship.
Yeah,
So
and what the other word of caution that I'll put out there is if your company and your organization is growing through acquisition and you're acquiring all these other organizations, all these other companies,
mhm,
try and make friends with the M&A, the mergers and
so
acquisitions
important,
people, so that they're
so
thinking
important.
about you in that process. Because I think,
Exactly.
again, this all goes back to CPTED, right? We
Yeah.
want to create an environment where people feel safe, happy, productive. And to do that, it's more than I want security lights here and I want a camera there and I want a
Hmm.
big planter here or cut the leaves or cut the trees down over here. It's more than that. It's truly, and if we can be empathetic for a little bit, it's really trying to help the folks who are going to be there be them their best selves, whatever that is.
Exactly.
Now, if you go to Disneyland or Disney World, when you're walking down Main Street, there's an effect that is occurring.
Yep.
There's a bit of septed in Disney as well, right? And when you're
Oh,
going down,
100%.
you've
We
got
may
the
not we may not think it or see it, but
no,
I
but
guarantee
that's
you
the idea, right?
it surrounds you.
It's around you, and you have a feeling of I'm at the happiest place on earth. Maybe you don't like the
Hmm.
crowds. if you've ever been there when it's relatively empty. Back in the 90s, we used to go to Disneyland a lot, and it would be, on a weekday, empty.
Yeah, yeah,
And you could walk down Main Street and not get run over by the kids in strollers. But the effect was that you felt like you were safe, and you felt like you could be
yeah,
yourself, and
yeah.
you could go and you could do great things.
Yeah, and
That's
that's really important because I mean, and you hit the nail on the head because I mean, there's actually been studies, if employees feel safe, they're going to be more productive, but if their time, if their energy, their emotional and mental energy is being like, oh my gosh, I'm kind of worried about this. Well,
Yeah,
then
or I'm
they're
worried
not
about
going to
my
be able to focus.
car, or I can't leave my wallet at my
Exactly.
desk.
Exactly. So, yeah, again, that's why it's important, get that feedback. And kind of a little side note here, speaking of that, if anyone has any experience with security satisfaction surveys and building them, please message me because I'm having a difficult time coming up with some of this stuff.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
um,
Great place to leave it, Kevin. This has been a great discussion about CPTED, how people can implement them in their organizations when they run into trouble. What do you do? How do you overcome that? Everything comes back to relationships. You may be the
exactly. Yeah.
greatest security
So much of
designer
it goes
in
through
the world, but
relationships.
everything's relationship driven. And being
Yeah.
able to kind of see around that corner, like, okay, your key stakeholders are not just facilities, employee health and safety, HR, and legal. No, you need a lot more. You need mergers
Yeah.
and acquisitions. You need procurement. You need the construction team. You're going to need all these other folks, all these other entities within your company that you need to make friends with
Yeah.
and be engaged with them. And I think it will help your CPTED, it'll
Yeah.
help your design, it'll help your employees, your guests, your clients, your customers.
Yeah,
It'll,
and even more importantly, getting that buy-in and that support from the C-suite. You know,
yeah,
we've heard this all through our lives. You lead by example. If you get
right.
that buy-in and that support from that top leadership, that will trickle down. I guarantee
That's
it.
right.
If you can, I've had conversations with our top leadership to tell them about, various aspects of the program and what we're trying to do and why. And, if you can convince them or show them, communicate effectively to them and showing them why it's important, and then or how it can positively affect the bottom line, whatever, um, more likely that they're going to buy into it, and then hopefully they'll set the example. you know so real quick example, we obviously, security professionals, we hate tailgating, piggybacking, but unfortunately
Yep,
everyone does it. you
that's
know
right.
but yeah, hey, I got some of our C-suite members say, hey, please make sure you're badging in. They do that, or if they see an employee, making sure that all the employees are badging in. I give them like these little $10 gift cards to like our little vending machine, and then
Yeah, yeah.
the C-suite will hand them out because they see it happening. And when they see it happening, or then someone receives that from a member of the C-suite, they're like, oh, okay, this is really important to them, so I'm going to make sure they keep doing this.
You're
So
reinforcing good behavior. That's
yeah,
CPTED
exactly.
too. Yeah.
Exactly. So
Great
yeah, just kind of
conversation,
wanted to
Kevin.
throw that,
A
make sure I threw
lot
that
out there.
one important note in there.
Yep, yep,
So,
that's great. Getting that
but
buy-in is super critical.
yeah,
Yeah,
but yeah, I loved this discussion. Definitely enjoyed talking about this because again, it's kind of one of those things that tends to get overlooked a lot in
yeah.
security programs. Understandable, but
Well, I
yeah,
think this is
guys,
really important, if I can, really quickly, that
yeah.
this is important because we're returning to work here pretty soon with a lot of our organizations, right? If they haven't
Yeah,
already been at work.
yeah, like, we're 100% back in the office.
RTW, this is all going to be top of mind. These things are things we should have been thinking about months and years ago. But if it isn't something you should think about, what's a great resource, by the way, that they can go and look for CPTED
Oh
information?
man, yeah, as is online, .org. Um, uh, Google CPTED or Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design. I can't remember the name of the website, but there is an entire organization that's similar to as is dedicated to CPTED.
Okay.
So they have a lot of great information. Or you can even look up, like facility security measures that the federal government uses. They employ a ton of CPTED. And those are open source. They might be a little older, but they are open source, and they do have a lot of great information in there. Or again, hey, you got questions? Reach out to me. Reach
Yeah.
out to Scott.
Yep.
Definitely glad to help you out. If we can't help you out, definitely point you in the right direction.
Point your right direction. Yep.
Exactly.
Great place to leave it. Great
But yeah,
conversation, Kevin. Thank you, buddy.
yeah. Everyone, thank you so much for watching. We really appreciate it again. Really like the support. Scott and I enjoy doing this. And again, if you guys ever have any, topics you'd like us to discuss, please feel free to reach out to us. If you want to join us sometimes, again, let us know, man. We're happy to have anyone and everyone on here.
That's right. Yep. Thanks, Kevin.
Scott, always good talking to you, man.
You too,
All
buddy.
right. See you, bud.